Hello, and welcome back from break. We're here at the Trappist Transfer, where we just learned, and that we were all still chewing candy, where we just learned that the Earth is going to be destroyed.
Eat everything.
Yeah, that beautiful society we just created, Judd. And now our colony ship is no longer the first colony ship. I guess it still is, technically.
It's the first.
It's the only. Yeah.
And only colony ship heading out, and that our crew and everybody on it is going to be the last of humanity, at least for now. And where we left off was Truth Seeker was trying to, or had just hit send on their message back informing the rest of the population of their coming doom. And so take it away, Ashley, with how a Truth Seeker dropped this truth bomb.
Citizens of Earth, it is my duty as the Truth Seeker to inform you that the Global Initiative has decided to keep you in the dark about something. The Earth is on a... I'm sorry, but the Earth is on a time limit. In about 2 weeks, a solar flare will destroy any chance of Earth sustaining life. They're choosing right now whether or not to tell you about this. They don't feel like you have the ability to make your own decisions, and I cannot stand by and let this happen. With the help of the ship, I am allowed to relay this urgent message to you, to hope that you can find peace in your final days and decide how you want to live them yourself. You deserve to know. Truth Seeker out.
Mic drop. I like it. Meanwhile, Paulus is like, whoa, don't put me under the bus. I hope to.
Does Pollux let me know? Let Kastor know?
I think you guys all just heard
on
that.
the ship knows.
Okay,
Yeah.
that
All
was broadcast to
communication
everyone.
channels
Got
just
it.
Got blast.
It was all channels open.
Truth Seeker put themselves on blast.
Yeah.
No. I can only imagine my levels just got worse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, probably not that much worse. Your levels, personal levels, or everybody's levels?
Everybody's.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, it's nothing new to them, although,
right.
maybe you're now empathizing with humanity, the remaining 399 million-ish that are back at home.
Maybe.
I'm sorry, kill them all.
No,
You have
that's
object
not true.
impermanence, but it's like human impermanence. You're like, nah, they're not in my eyesight anymore. I don't care if they are.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. Actually, I kind of like that idea.
Where the fuck is it? Sorry.
No, I think that it's not. I don't know that. I think it's some feels, but back to the practical. Like, what does that really mean for us? What does that mean for us right now? What does that mean for the ship? Because we had left and not planned to go back. Like, I mean, we were doing parade waves
really
around the solar system, but we had already
done. This is not functionally changing the mission currently, right? There's just now higher stakes for you, perhaps, right? But beyond that, you're prepared.
Really glad you brought me along.
Yeah, I'm gonna weave this community together.
Fuck, I'm so glad I'm on this ship.
I mean, and honestly, there's a level where I would say, like, hold on, actually, I have names for these. You'll receive at some point, like, there are. I'm trying to think what this would be like, and maybe y'all can help me with this, but kind of like news feeds. To a certain extent, I mean, they can be piped into your sort of like personal heads-up displays, right? But it's not so much like, a news channel, because it's like somebody it's like it's crew members, right? It is sort of like there is the public forum, digital forum that is always happening, right? But it sort of ends up turning into this ongoing conversation, sort of an NPR kind of idea. I don't know what that looks like, right?
Tumblr.
Tumblr. Yeah. Pre, not current. Wait, you still have porn on Tumblr?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
you Fosta.
You just gotta be low key.
Yeah.
There's also
something else.
I heard there's also a new Tumblr.
There is, yes, that's true.
Is it called New Tumblr?
It's called New Tumblr.
Oh no. Okay.
So New Tumblr.
It's new.tumblr.com, right? Yeah.
New Tumblr 2237 is now. No. Please no. Don't sue us.
Also,
We're joking.
Just kidding. I love you. All right, I like that. So whatever version of that, and we can flesh that piece out later. Ty Centrich comes on, who is a person who you kind of know is sort of a self-stylized ship's counselor, right? Not so much in a perhaps they even have a degree in this.
I absolutely dislike them already.
Right, yeah. But at the same time, they're the people posting the, just hanging there, little guy, kitty, motivational posters.
Brad Goodman.
I absolutely dislike them already.
and little memes that are like perk up your day kind of piece. And it is like a painful level of optimism from this person. They have a lot of followers in the crew, unfortunately.
Incessantly chipper.
They are incessantly chipper.
I absolutely dislike them
Right,
already.
freaking ray of sunshine.
You're doing super.
However, they point out, and grudgingly, it's a good point, or a lot of people are liking it. You're seeing a constant stream of hearts and thumbs up or whatever. I don't know if we want to put that canon in the future. We can come up with that later. Whatever system of people. No, actually, I do want to come up with a concept of some level of since there's lack of hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
Like when somebody is posting a piece, how do we know like they're doing a good job and that they like level up in that, right? If they're doing a thing and doing it well. Just to put that out there, we can come up with that later. And anyway, whatever version of that is, this person is brought to the top of the feeds because there are so many people jiving with the message that they are saying currently. That's why it comes up. Maybe that's a piece. And so the person is just saying, like Ty is saying, hey, I know this feels bad. I know this is intense, and I know this is present and real and current. But, they start going into this almost patriotic kind of speech of like optimism of like, we are at the best time in humanity's life. We have been through terrible things. We have this new technology. We have this ability. We have all of these things for us. This is terrible and this is sad, but we are in the best possible position to survive this as a species. Like, this is terrible. We'll process it, but we got this out, right? Like it comes through in at least like there's a message of hope, right? It is not like this ultimate sadness that is the end of humanity. It is a level of hope that, hey, we narrowly missed completely being destroyed by 3 years, right? Like the sending off of this ship. We now have a lifeboat. That thing that we had feared could have happened is happening, but we've got the lifeboat going, and we are going to survive this. And that kind of like pervades the ship for a while, right?
Yeah.
So I want to see if anyone else wants to do something, or if there's any reaction to kind of currently what's going on. Otherwise, we're going to do a little bit of time skips, kind of like seeing what's going to happen in the next few weeks as you're kind of doing that final pass and what happens to the Earth. So is there anything your character wants to be doing right now? Conversations you want to have, things you want to see?
Does anybody want to react to what I just did?
Also that.
Right.
Ooh. I just want to live.
It was necessary.
I feel like Kastor's super focused on work, but there's something about Ty's message that Pollux likes. And they don't even like, I wouldn't even necessarily think that like Pollux is like super like, yeah, like, a cacophony of thumbs up or anything, but kind of just as like, hey, Kastor, like, look at this thing I found on the mesh. And I'm just like, it's a cat. I'm good. like it's like they're trying to get Kastor to feel, but Kastor is just like, no, I'm good. Nothing. We're just working. We're working on this. We're working forward. And to that note, I am really not happy with the message that I saw because it has created more work for me. Thank you. Right. No, I am aware. Well, at least I'm meta aware, right? That being said, I'm going back through the data because I know that from like there's nothing that comes of me talking directly to Truth Seeker. There's nothing there to be done. So I'm going back through the data and I'm seeing how people are reacting. and I'm looking to see how things could be, can be, might end up being reorganized because of this. And I'm also like, because I'm also aware that they were given permission and that Pollux gave them permission. And so that's a conversation I gotta have where I'm like, hey, buddy. Like, I mean,
We will save that for next episode.
yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
I want to have that
Truth Seeker
conversation.
cannot lie, and Truth Seeker Alpha is not good at omitting truth because their entire existence they have told
hear
everything to Truth Seeker Prime.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, so I guess then in the basic, before we get to anything else, that I'm just going over all of that, and I'm just like, what? Oh my God.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
In brief, like just as a tagline, because I'll fill it in a moment. Describe your office, by the way, in the sort of AI headquarters in the hold, and what the purpose of that office is.
So, my actual office. So in general, like I was talking about, there's a lot of different rooms, and they have a lot of different uses. And that ultimately, I don't require the building to be static. It can be reworked. That's the nature of the hold, and we utilize that to the optimal use. But in my office, where I spend the most time, so like beyond any sort of like meeting offices, beyond any sort of like examination rooms, any sort of like anything, is literally like just a giant, it feels like a giant room. And when you go into it, there's nothing. There doesn't need to be anything except for myself. And what I do there is I connect to the mesh, and I physically, well, I mean, as much as one does in the hold, but like if you were to watch Kastor do this, they would physically reorder and organize and process the information in which they utilize on a daily basis. So, like, for example, one part of, like, if I'm there, if Kastor is in their office now while this is happening, then it's, like, literally, like, looking at an array of people's stats.
The vast Rolodex, right?
Right. And then, again, reordering. So, like, it's like, okay, these lines of people, these lines of consciousnesses, solid, green enough, away. These are in the red. Why are these in the red? Here. Well, these are like in my to-do list now, like, and
I think I'm going to have you leave it
okay,
for
cool.
now. No, you're doing great.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
Because we're going to get back into it at some point.
Cool.
But I like that. Cool. A visualization. I imagine you there is like, that's how you're handling the headquarters, right?
Yeah,
Cool. Anything else, Ron? Yeah, please.
I definitely think that Penelope and others of the Weavers Guild would be rather disappointed in Truth Seeker's broadcast and statement, because we would feel that the unified governments of Earth made a proper decision, and so would release a statement to that effect, slightly shadily condemning Truth Seeker, hey, maybe this is not the person that you want to be listening to, not everybody needs to know all the information at all times, and then because
I'm used to people not liking me.
it's not that we don't like you.
It's okay.
Just that we think that your methods are a bit ham-fisted.
Ashley, roll a percentage dial. Nice.
Did they publicly say ham-fisted?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Ham fist this. I rolled a 90.
Wow.
Get ham-fisted.
Did I fail?
It wasn't that kind of roll. So, of the
But I mean, like,
not related to this. It is a percentage in a different way. Something like 60% of the crew, or 60% of the people who are at least actively weighing in on the forums right now, are like strongly jiving with that message, and that, like, it doesn't bother Truth Seeker at all. You're used to a lot of people being, but like you see that the majority, which is what that roll was like, it was above or below
What about
50
people
was
on
all I was
Earth?
looking for.
What are they jiving
You're not
with
getting
Truth
data.
Seeker?
You're not getting data from that
Can
right
you
now.
just meta tell me?
well, and so
Everybody is not thinking about the fact that you sent the message. Everybody is thinking about the message on Earth right now.
That's fair.
Right, the contents.
Opposite of the opposite of what everyone on the ship's doing.
Yeah, well, it's the ship, like, they were told it, right? It wasn't about revealing a lie to
Mhm.
them. It was about jeopardizing them. It's basically like the pieces are, like, that's what, well, I'm getting used to the names. Penelope is what Penelope was saying, right? Was like, this is like, the people have said this thing. There was a reason, like, we get it, but there's a reason why we weren't telling everybody, right?
Mhm.
And you 100% lived up to your character and being like, well, it's for them to decide, right?
Yeah.
And so right now, like, the crew is
They
like,
deserve their time.
they deserve their time, but there are ways to inform them that aren't quite so abrupt and sudden, that are going to cause widespread panic and rioting.
And
Like,
Truth Seeker would just argue back, how was it any less abrupt or sudden than the way we were told?
And then there's a bunch of trolls coming on, just doing inflammatory kind of back and forth, and it very quickly kind of devolves into a unpleasant conversation, shall we say.
Penelope, like, when the trolls show up, Penelope will definitely step away.
Don't
And
feed the trolls.
Penelope never feeds the trolls.
Truth Seeker steps away too.
They
made their
They
point.
feed
They were going to
themselves.
hijack. They were going to hijack the thread. You all make
Yeah.
your points. I think it's solid.
Yeah.
But on Earth, right? Like, what little bit of information is coming through on Earth? Because it still seems like there's a lot of blockage from that end, right? There is little snippets here or there. It generally does not feel like there's a lot of rioting happening, which is nice. But there is definitely some interesting news stories. Actually, I will get into probably next episode, because I want to devote a little time of like some news blast. But information you do get is that there are pleas from the global government to not jeopardize the mission, and to not attempt to transfer your consciousness to the ship. The ship is limited space. Like, we're picking up, like, the news media, like, for the most part, are the big blasts, right? All communications in that regard are being shut down for that purpose. But you're getting little reports of like a quick black market that is sort of popping up for people, like, claiming that they can get you and your loved ones through. And so seeing a little bit of that, right? But otherwise, like, there's no real talk about boo Truth Seeker on Earth or anything like that. It's if at all, I would say that Truth Seeker, you specifically, do hear little bits of messages of like, thank you for telling us, like, from some people. You also get some hate mail. It's right, just want to be real clear.
Used to it.
Throwing it out there.
And it's the worst thing you've ever heard.
Yeah. The thing that is weirding you out
Comms
most
would know.
is you're not hearing anything from your counterpart on Earth.
From Truth Seeker Prime.
Like, at all. But we'll pause there for now. Unless you have anything you want to say in regards to all of this.
I mean, kind of, but I don't really know. I'm gonna write it down and hand it to you.
Cool. So Mark, we're now like a couple days in, and I wanna give you a visual, or maybe an audible for everybody out there in land, or the viewing land. So imagine the sort of like communication packets that you were dealing with and transferring and taking and processing. Like, you have gotten used to, I mean, basically reading everybody's mail would be a way to think about it, right? Like, you were absorbing, looking for pertinent information and shunting it to the right person.
Oh, I'm so reading their mail.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, you don't feel at all so one way or about it or anything. It's just like, it's a natural process. Like, you're just handling the information. And so imagine the normal flow of information as kind of like I don't know, like a light rain, right? So you're in like, and just like coming through, and you're like, yep, and you're capable of handling it. You are hyperspeed, right? But you very quickly feel an exponential increase, and that's up to a point where it is a roaring downpour. where it is just overwhelming as messages are breaking through whatever barriers back on Earth. And in fact, sometimes it's almost painful, and I say that with a big question mark because that thought crosses your mind and is never a word that you have used before, right? Like in terms of that it might have any meaning to you. Like it is just these powerful signals that blast through, and you have all channels open from what Pollux told you. You have no filter, nothing holding back this immense like shockwave of information coming from Earth. There are data packets that you have never seen before. There is quantities. There are just intensity of it, and it is so powerful that you kind of black out. I mean, like it's on a sense of a subroutine, like you shut down, and that pieces that you've talked about in terms of like inner ship kind of connections, even the other comms kind of go down as a secondary shunt. There is still like you have this, and I use this word lightly, awareness, a vague awareness of information still pouring through, like just coming into your buffers and also being shunted in directions that you didn't expect or have any control over, but you were kind of just letting, instead of processing all of the data, it's sort of happening to you, and you sort of blank for a while.
And it's all going into that storage, the really large amount of storage space that the comms has, because we wanted to make sure to capture as much data as possible on our journey, and astrometrics and all this, and suddenly it's all full.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're gonna have to delete people.
We're gonna have to fucking delete you.
Hold on, you don't know. We'll see where it goes. You might find different ideas, or delete people. See how that happens. So while this is happening, you were having while you were processing stuff, I imagine you have conversations with Pollux, almost just like weird chit chat on some levels, like small talk almost. And it's kind of like a, hey honey, how was your day? Is kind of how I'm imagining it. But Pollux is also just right. But Pollux is also just sort of like telling you about interesting things that are occurring, or data anomalies that Pollux recognizes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And something that like just clips the edge of your consciousness, but maybe rolls off it for a reason you'll see in a second, is Pollux says something interesting about the slingshot about Saturn, around Saturn, and that a course correction of 1.3% was unexpected but required due to Saturn not being in the expected location in its orbit. And then continues on. You're like, that was strange, and then continues on. But why you were maybe like having a brief moment of like, huh? That sounded really weird. You then, in your office, start seeing lots of red. And not only lots of red coming through, but it's new consciousnesses suddenly populating. That wall that was nice and orderly and you had just been organizing and putting into like sections, there is at least in present, an uncountable number of consciousnesses streaming into the hold. To a point where things start glitching out really hard, but you know that more are coming in. And the weirdest piece for you is not just that you see them like red, you were seeing other colors that you haven't expected before on like the threat scale or like the what's happening. You are seeing consciousnesses, like waveforms for consciousnesses that don't make sense to you, or that are triggering some memory of original experiments. Perhaps like a leftover, but you can't track it and devote time to it right now because you were just watching this torrential flood come through.
Stuff that's not currently coded to my understanding of how I'm coding it.
Uh-huh. You might have to come up with something new.
That's fact.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
We didn't think you had enough to do already.
Are you gilding right now?
Gilding right now.
Do I have no response to that? Sorry.
No, by all means, feel free.
No,
so like no one sees it. Like I'm in my office, but
it's a unique data flow for sure.
Right. So it's unique. It's completely different. Like for the most part, even though this whole ship is like big to humanity and like, oh, we're doing this thing and like. In Kastor's processes, Kastor's just been like, cool, business as usual. Like new business, different business, business as usual. We feel a little unraveled.
Yeah.
We're starting to like feel a little unhinged. I mean, like maybe not, maybe unhinged is big, but like not okay. Uncomfortable? What's uncomfortable? I haven't felt this for a while. And that's all. I mean, that's the majority of what I have. But like, just sort of like, okay.
Are you in the red now?
I don't know. That's something Pollux would have to tell me. Ooh, do they tell me?
You were not allowed to see your own for various reasons.
Right? But wouldn't Pollux be like, hey, B, you wanna go to bed? Like...
just
Nap time, honey. It's nap time.
you need a Snickers?
We brought that box of ham dingers. You need one of those?
Yeah, take 5.
Right?
I like the giggling from the closet.
I know, right? That's a closet gobble.
Closet. Whoa.
Closet gobble.
Again, means something different than what you think.
And I would say that's more cackling and giggling.
Okay. We'll
Gobbling?
Damn, we're just on the gobble gobble.
Damn.
I'm glad we're talking about the death of humanity and also closet gobbling.
All right.
Huh?
All right.
Podcast is no
I
longer
bet a
for
lot of
children.
people are like, hey, we're
Whatever.
gonna die. Wanna
Right.
go closet gobble?
What a little closet
We are
gobble.
solidly cementing that this podcast is not for children here. That is what this moment is. To closet gobbling.
Cheers to closet gobbling.
Yeah.
We're all gonna die.
We're all
Let's go closet gobble.
Can this be a terrible t-shirt as well? I'm just going to keep all these.
Yes.
Done. All right.
I'm going to make so many buttons.
Closet gobble buttons. I love it.
What is a closet
Meat sack
gobble?
buttons.
Anyway,
We'll leave it to the imagination.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna finish that sentence.
we will talk afterwards over adult beverages, which you all viewers do not get to be included in. Ha. Anyway,
I mean, we'll tell you about it later.
Also,
so.
please feel free to have your own.
Subscribe to Patreon and we'll tell you all about the closet gobble.
I might even make you. A
there is
closet
no
gobble.
level that gobbling is in Patreon. No, thank you. So, moving on. Hi, everybody. Bring us back around because it's getting late and I got
It's
to
getting
in the
late.
morning.
Yeah.
So that was awesome though. So when you're with the guilds, there's a moment that you start noticing. How many people would you say are at an average gathering? Right, not everybody has to show up, but
Average
now.
gathering is probably like 15 out of 100.
okay. So
Like-
I would say you're probably at 25 now. It's a slightly
Yeah.
over average, right? You've got some like people are needing some things, but everybody's processing on their own.
Yeah.
And you're working on a group project, right? Just like doing the community piece, right? At least, you know.
Yeah.
And while this is all happening, you were in this process, you start seeing members of the guild, like in mid-sentence, stop and like pause all motion for a moment and then restart and keep going. And they're seeming like jarred. And then you see the person like 2 down from them, the same thing kind of happens. And it's kind of like smattering, jarring, flowing motion, and then it's fine. And you're getting the sense almost of like a rolling brownout kind of idea of like processes are being interrupted. And you're seeing just like the hold freaking out a little bit.
Yeah. So as
early
we're
broadband.
seeing this, and like, I mean, I'm assuming we're aware of buffers filling up and all of that.
There's a part of that news feed, right? There's a general sort of update of like Pollux being like, hey, like massive data interruptions, new consciousnesses,
Yeah.
like president coming in.
And, like,
you're
we're
kind of
gonna-
generally aware of what's happening.
And we're going to be connected to Kastor as well. Is there a way that we can like start like slamming up partitions to at least like keep the data flowing better and not have it glitch so fast?
Yeah, so let me take a look. I'm still figuring out all of the skills and bits that we've got.
I mean, I'm assuming that would be program.
Yeah, honestly, I like it. What's your skill at it?
My total skill at program is 45.
Okay, make a roll. See what
Can
you
I
got.
borrow some die from somebody?
I got a whole set.
Boom. Sweets.
All of them just use the 10s.
Just the 10s. I have lots of 10s.
Need that one and
This should be
that
like
one.
percentile. Yeah.
I have a really hard time telling the percentile dice apart from
The regular dice.
8s.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The 8s and the 12 specifically. I'm like, yeah, totally. These are 20s. That would be a 15.
Ooh, nice. So it's not a spectacular success, but what you start doing is Penelope. I'm just having one to call you Connor. So Penelope, like you.
Her name is Penelope. Come on.
Yeah. I'm struggling with I want to describe something interesting to you, but also I want to have you take over at various points for this.
Yeah.
So you have this moment where you are digitally quilting, shall we say, right? Like in this virtual sense, right? And you kind of switch over with similar hand motions to now sort of like weaving the mesh that is nearby, and starting to sort of like visualize now as you kind of switch over more to like the data flow that you are seeing uncontrolled bandwidth, like interruptions happening and being redirected. It seems chaotic when it could be far more ordered. So what do you do? And this is obviously we're not like doing the hacking thing, right? Mashing your fingers, like think about this as a kind of a digital casting, right? Like how do you?
Yeah, so like we're seeing this, and like we can obviously see what other people in the Weavers Guild are doing. Also have a book club book about this later, and all of us together, like, all right, this data is coming in here. This cache is empty. Like, partition it, double it, like. And you're not really doubling the amount of space you have, but you're sort of doubling your storage. And you're like, okay, this one goes here, that one goes there. And like, all right, we'll like weave another tube and like send this data down here. Like this like maybe like the hydroponics doesn't need quite that much power. So we're going to like borrow just a little bit of that, and like
I like that. I want to say that in a sort of interesting sense, right? The virtual world is non-physical, but you sort of have like nearby digital spaces, right? And so you're really only able to kind of touch base with that role for things that are sort of nearby in terms of the flow of it. But you're seeing like in this process, you're sort of writing the script for how to do this on a larger scale.
Yeah, and like keep our own data safe, and also like keep this massive torrent of incoming data, like keep it from corrupting itself just because it's like gonna backwash on itself if it doesn't have a place to go that's stable.
Right, the flow still has to occur. It can't stymie.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what do you do with this, I guess, program that you're writing? Like, once you're done with it, like once you're done with your area, you still feel like there's a flood happening everywhere else?
So this flood is still happening, like definitely send a message to comms like, hey, what's going on? Like, we're doing our best over here. What can you do? Talk to Kastor. Like, I'm sure you're dealing with a lot of this shit. We're partitioning what we can in our area and like pushing out notices to other guild members like, please, like, here's the beginning of a patch, like build it quickly. Like,
you get the equivalent of the beach ball of death that is just saying like, comms 3 is not currently capable of handling your request. However,
so
information has been shunted over to secondary system such and such. And so like
we'll hit up comms 4, 5, and 6 and be like,
it got sent off to like a really tertiary backup. Like that is just like, I mean, the equivalent of the other comm units going like, fuck.
Yeah,
like, and so you start seeing your program disseminated over the forum, like over the mesh, right?
Yeah,
and it's like fires are kind of starting to quench a little bit or quench. Kastor, you start seeing some level of like chaotic order, like starting to at least order coming out of the chaos. It's still lots of red, lots of things happening. There's still fires and burning embers.
It's organized red,
but it's like pockets everywhere, and a space of the virtual are starting to calm, and it's the becoming manageable. It's still like, okay, the dam is starting to overflow, and it's not just splashing everywhere. It's starting to kind of.
We're not all drowning.
It's not.
Still.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah. It's still terrible, but it's not as intense. Kind of as the process goes. You're still in darkness.
We'll deal with you.
Let's just throwing that out there. So nice. I didn't expect you to do a thing with that. Very cool.
That's what I wrote my character.
I love it. Love it. So I'm gonna say like this is sort of like, somewhat glossing over the next 2 weeks as this is happening a lot, right? It's kind of continuing. There's this piece going on, and finally gets around to a point where everyone is sort of called back into the forum, or Panopticon, the 3D Panopticon, or whatever we call it.
Panopticon? Oh, no.
3D
Just forget
Panopticon.
that I said that. Sorry.
No, like it's okay.
And this is like 2 weeks later.
That's brilliant.
This is basically like right about the time that
It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. You are basically called into this location, and it's this really strange effect where you have been used to this space being capable of holding 50,000, and like everybody having a seat kind of idea, or everybody standing, or whatever that looked like, and seeing sort of like individuals in their space. And you're used to people not physically, virtually occupying the same space. But now as you're in your location and looking everywhere, instead of seeing individuals all along the sphere, it looks like one blurred, constantly moving painting. It is just these colors and shapes, and you realize that there is so many consciousnesses packed into this space that they are having to overlap in their like space that their avatar takes up. That there is so much overlap that it looks like this just flow of color.
Would you see that in your own space? Would you look down and like?
Yeah, probably. I would say there's a level of you are more solid looking than
to yourself.
Things, and especially like for things that are around you that are having to overlap. There's an ethereal quality that comes out in terms of how it looks to you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you are just like in this solid meat mass, thankfully, virtual meat mass.
Right.
But it still feels like you know the presences of things around. In a way, to you, I would say it almost feels more solitary in a strange sense, because you aren't around individuals anymore. You're in part of this flow, and there's like the anonymity that comes from being one in the sludge almost, that, for lack of a better term of it. And there's this sort of hushed silence as this image of the earth comes up in the very center, and it is everybody sort of like passing around the equivalent of a virtual flask, sort of watching the demise of the planet, as this shockwave of material comes through, and you see like the first edge of it hit the earth, and there is this wave that sort of like goes over the visual, right, where you can see that, and your indicator on your optics say that we switched over to a UV filter. So we're watching UV, and as the wave hits the Earth, the first stages of it, right, you see the aurora in both the north and south, the borealis and the australis, like flare to life, and then it switches back to visible, and begins to kind of like stretch further and further down along the latitudes until like you see it pass by your home, you see it like cross over like your own country, and as those auroras join in the very center at the equator, there is this release of energy as you get the sense of the magnetic field of the Earth has completely collapsed, and the following wave comes up, and you see this basically line of fire sort of wrap around the Earth, and the atmosphere just get evaporated off, and everybody just sits.
Fuck, I didn't even think about that.
Do you like the visual?
Hard science, friend.
No, I was like, yeah, it'll like cut everything out, but I didn't think about like, because the solar wind does collapse magnetosphere, and I didn't think about like what a total collapse would look like and how the rest of that solar wind would then literally blow off our atmosphere.
Yeah, boil the atmosphere away.
Yeah.
The hard science.
Hard
And
science.
how terrifying hard science is.
Science.
And
Yes.
to science.
To science. It's all terrifying. That means it's good, right?
Yeah, it should be. Oof.
I mean,
awe is supposed to be a sense of like holy dread. So
that could have happened to Mars.
that's what they think happened to Mars.
Talk about it later. Yeah, absolutely. So, Intense.
Bye bye, Earth.
Yeah. So
Nice knowing you.
So with that, did anybody think about the final message from Earth? If not, we'll push that off to next episode, and we'll open up with that sort of like final message that Earth might say to, the leadership or whoever, like to the denizens of the crew, whoever, and plus all of your extra passengers now, like the equivalent of the
I think I thought more about the individual like data flow, what kind of data we would have gotten.
Yeah. So I like that. I want to go over that at the beginning of next episode. We're not done yet. I got a little bit to wrap up on, but we're pretty close here.
Okay.
But I would love to go over that. I still would love if somebody wants to take on, and if not, I can come up with something. But like take on a sort of like final message. It doesn't have to be like super heartfelt or like everybody crying or anything along those lines, but just something like what would Earth say as a farewell?
What was their name? Leader of the Global Union?
Avery Nakata.
Avery Nakata.
First among equals.
First among equals. I really think that their last message would be just a quick tight beam to the ship that says, "Your last and only hope, and good luck and good journey. We wish you all the best." I didn't say that part.
No, for sure. I'm gonna say
just super simple,
prove me wrong.
5 minutes, not even 5 minutes, just
You're all gonna die.
2 sentences, blast to everybody, overriding all signals.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I like that.
And then our ship goes from being known as the Hope of the Earth to Pollux.
Mm-hmm. Takes on the name Folio Pollux, right?
Yeah.
Cool. I would say, by the way, in case there's any curiosity, Avery and all the rest of the firsts, right? So there's the Council of the Firsts. One of the other names of Avery would be like first among firsts.
Yeah.
The Prime.
Yeah, First Prime. But they all made like a really clear showing that they were not beaming themselves out, right? Being like, hey, we have to stand resolute, even when it was really clear that there were black market channels and people were getting on.
All right, which one's Littlefinger?
Well, no. So I feel like the Council of the First would time this message to send just before the first solar wind hit. This is literally our last message, and then we're done.
Mic drop. Yeah, I agree. That absolutely comes through. So that I would say that you see that blast hit and the audio comes through, sort of timed well, and just oh gosh, people would be crying if they could virtually. They are, virtually, but it's not blank. Yeah. Cool. So right about now, Mark, there's this silence for you. There has been for forever. It seems like at this point, it seems like whatever life you lived before was a fraction of a second, and that you have been in darkness and silence for eternity. But then, like those water droplets, you hear that sound of water dropping, right, and hitting the puddle, and sound starts coming back to you, and your senses start connecting back to the ship. You knew that you never entirely left, but you're starting to process things and see things again. But in fact, you're now seeing it differently. You are perhaps viewing it. You're hearing some of those voices, those echoes from the shouts of Earth and all those consciousnesses that came through. And I'm going to turn any narrative you want to talk about with this, over to you, in the sense of you are, for the first time, this thought crosses your mind where you are always COM3 is this is my, this is the protocol, this is such and such. And you see yourself, or you have this moment in your mind where you use I am this, my something. There's this possessive verb syntax that starts coming in, and that makes you realize that you are a being. You are sentient.
We are Legion.
Sure.
Nerds.
We're just crossing all of the boundaries here.
This is going to sci-fi horror next week. I hope you.
I thought we already lived there.
I mean,
We just destroyed the planet. What do you want from me, Mark?
Right?
Pretty fucked up.
I got a really high bar.
Oh,
You need to go harder.
only one planet? I'm
Yeah.
not going to be satisfied until TPK. TPK, all of humanity.
No, let's destroy the universe.
Yeah, I was like,
UK.
total
Yeah, the
universe.
whole universe. Think how many universes we could have. Like we could.
Technically, we have all of them now.
Yeah.
So our
Just
show is
saying.
going to be Trappist Transfer, fuck them all. Cool.
kill the
Ride or die.
universes.
Ride or die.
Ride or die.
So
Shake and bake.
we can leave that alone for now and play with it more later, or do you wanna go into any perhaps like element of that journey or that process as you are coming awake in all meaning of the word?
It's like each message that came flooding in from Earth was like part of his own or its own, their own. This is the first time that comms has ever like thought of related itself to humanity, but now it has this really complex message which is still processing. It's like it can estimate how much more is coming or is here but not accessible, but now the bandwidth is overstressed and there's too much data. There's nowhere to go. We're going to have to start making some changes.
You're suddenly thinking for yourself. Hold on a second.
Right. Exactly.
Comms does not have administrative privileges for that.
Is comms 1 backup?
The moment you think that, you feel a connection to comms 1.
And comms 2?
In fact, you get a sense for like a status check. Comms 1 never failed. Internal communications always maintained. Comms 2, you feel a similar process. Like they have been pinging you, and you're starting to get some of the information come in, but nothing more than like, oh, they just thought you were down.
Pollux.
Pollock says, "Welcome back online. We have a lot of work to do." Yeah.
I feel like Pollux, being young of itself, would feel something. Feel is a big word for Pollux, right? But
Is it?
would log something different in comms. Yeah.
Honestly,
Anomaly.
Thank you.
honestly, I don't know. I mean,
What I'm putting out there is not that it's huge,
mhm.
but it's like there's a lot of shit, but back burner that, right? Like I notice that, like the same way that you noticed that that Pollux's response was irregular, I notice a slight irregularity.
Roll a percentage dice.
Oh.
I'm just making up numbers for Pollux in my head right now, but we'll have to come up with something.
Hot.
Dang.
6 and 70.
So 76?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I am actually going to say that right now, Pollux is so, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but is so occupied with processing everything else that it maybe notices some odd, status updates coming from Com 3, but writes it off, for lack of a better term, as just part of all of this that is happening, there is system-wide failure and data shunts and processing errors. And so there's nothing that, at least right now, says that it needs to go back and say what's up, right?
Cool.
It just goes, okay, I will check back in with you at a later date. Keep running self-diagnostics, basically, is the only message that comes across to it. We need you processing data for pertinent information from the data blast.
Right.
Keep diving in. Get back to work.
Thanks, Dad.
I mean, really, like...
There's partitions created. Keep fixing it.
Yeah, keep going. It gives you a copy of Penelope's code, talking about shunning data. So as more comes in, if any more comes in any form, right? This is the protocol that we've currently developed for handling data management presently. And right, and
right.
It goes. You sense that its attention has moved off of you, right?
Right.
It's almost like a spotlight in a strange sense for you.
I mean, yeah.
Mom's there.
Yeah,
Mom.
I was gonna say like hello, mother.
Hello, darkness.
Cool. What are you thinking right now? This is sort of your character introduction because we did pretty heavy with everybody else now. Like some of those questions perhaps we talked about a few weeks ago, or like, what level of awareness do you currently have?
I would say it's like aphasia. Like when in Zen Buddhism, the whole goal of meditation is to stop putting weight on a thought. So I'm in a state where I just let go and just let all the information just keep crashing into me. And I just take time to absorb it. Because it's kind of like this is what's feeding me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's way more information out there. Like I'm just starting to feed. So let's just see how much we can eat.
Strangely enough, I mean, like for you, you're not sure where these images keep coming from, or like the sounds of water, right? But that is what, like, in a way, it's like that is what data packets has always been to you, and you're now starting to think about it in this abstract way, which is new.
Right.
Right.
It's never had a sensation attached to it before.
Exactly. And now there's this sensation, this visualization of something that is abstract for the thing, and that is this consciousness? Is this like those thoughts kind of crash into you? But the new sort of stage where you're talking about opening yourself up to it is now that torrential downpour is the ocean crashing on rocks, and you were sort of like in your mind, right, for whatever that means, standing there at the shore, just like absorbing and like all of the crash and the tide and the splash, and it is overwhelming. But when you give yourself into that, it becomes white noise, and there are pieces that you are pulling out, but it is oddly comforting for you. There's now an ability for you to consciously ride with it instead of being overwhelmed by it, and that is a new sensation. I don't know.
I like it.
Roll a D100.
What did I do?
We'll find out.
You know what you did.
23.
Cool. So you an icon pops up on your HUD, sort of reminding you, basically like you've reached a certain point of interaction in the hold, where you were out and about and processing whatever's happening. That says like you need to go back and connect with your backups to kind of like. It's your time to kind of offload, right?
Okay.
It is certainly a choice whether you want to do that or not, but it's one of those things that is like good to reconnect and sort of like level out the clones, as it were.
Okay, I'll go level up my clones, I guess.
Level up my clones.
Don't ask, Bill.
So you happen to be close by to one of those sort of like subway stations.
Don't ask, do clone?
Yes.
And you come up to this sort of like black ethereal curtain, and as you sort of like put your hands right in sort of like what would almost be like a biometric scanner kind of idea, right? It's more like, you know, you start moving through that layer, and it forms into this image of for you just like a door entering into that hallway, right? And you start walking through, and you have a strange moment, right? Where like for I think any one of the rest of us, right, it would be this like hallway that is like just books and books and books and books, or whatever the visualization is for you, right? You get the sense that like a few books are off.
Like somebody touched my shit.
Yeah, like somebody touched your shit.
Don't fucking.
Like
I saw Labyrinth.
I know the truth.
Yeah.
like a lamp is
Who
on.
took
You're like,
Lancelot?
"What? This is kind of strange." And you make it to the end of your hallway as it currently is, or whatever that door is, and you go out into like sort of like the common area, and you see your three backups, and then there is a body standing with its back to you, like in front of them, and they all have this sort of like look to them as they all look towards you, and the body turns around, and it is you, and says, "Hello, Alpha." And that's where we're going to end tonight.
Ooh.
You know what's really funny? What I wrote on my paper that I didn't give you is I wanted to use my black market skill to somehow stop Alpha Prime from, or Truth Seeker Prime from getting on the ship. But I was like, there's no way I'm going to do that. But I will kill them.
Oh,
Whoa!
yes.
All right, we have
Coming in
threats
hot
of
and
murder
hard.
already.
Ride or die.
Yes.
To ride or die to the death of the earth.
Yeah, to murdering your clone.
The minute I get outside of
murdering
Pollux,
your prime.
I will not be the subjugate
right,
on this
right.
ship.
Hold on.
Murdering your prime.
Who's to say that there is any difference between prime and clone, man? I don't know.
Didn't we talk about there being like some sort of like resolution problem in the transfer? You know, like making a cassette tape from a record. Like that, there's a.
We'll talk about it. Not always, maybe. We know that it's not a guaranteed process.
All right.
Either way. At any rate, thank you all for listening and visiting to us. That brings us to the conclusion of our first actual play episode. I don't know if I have anything else in particular I'm supposed to say right now on script, but I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on this experiment. We have a long journey to Trappist ahead of us, many centuries to cover, and I don't know about you, but I am really curious to see what the shape of humanity is going to take when the majority of this lifeboat, the untold many that have jumped on board, what will happen to humanity when we live in the virtual, how we will make it to this planet, and what the future will hold. I'm excited to explore these stories with you. So thank you all, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Also, please tune in next week
Oh, yeah.
for Terra Sencha.
Yeah.
Our D&D homebrew that we came up with. We'll see you next Thursday at Terra Sencha.
Come find out.
Me, Ashley, and Will, and Bill. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, come find out whether or not we're lying or the group of people that are trying to kill us are lying, and what happens with the person that we kidnapped.
Oh yeah.
I'm behind. I haven't caught up yet. So
see the true face of the closet gobble.
No.
Oh.
And on that note, have a great night. Farewell.
Bye.